A guy shot his wife after he found her cheating. He was hysterical and scared shitless about what he had just done. He put the phone down, and there was another gunshot. He killed himself, and I heard it. His wife was still alive, and she was screaming that she forgave him over and over, and that they were going to get through this. It was fucked. She survived, so there's a little bright side to the story. I had helped a maybe 12-year-old boy start CPR on his mother, who attempted suicide on July 4th some years back. She died, and that's never left me. I got a call from a guy saying he was sitting in his car with a shotgun and was going to kill himself. He seemed very calm, and I could tell in his voice that he had made his mind up, and this wasn't a cry for help like most of the other suicide calls I receive. He told me he was at one of our train stations, but wouldn't tell me which one, so while I had officers out looking for him, I made small talk with him about his family and sports. I even had him laugh a few times. After about 10 minutes of talking, and me thinking I had made progress, he finally says, "Well, it's been nice talking to you, but I gotta get going." He then proceeded to put the gun in his mouth and pull the trigger. I heard his death gurgles. I've had a lot of messed up calls as a 911 operator. This lady was screaming. Just horrific screaming. Then the phone went dead. I called back, only to hear that horrific screaming again. Then I heard someone in the background yelling, "He's stabbing her." She died. He got caught by an officer I had dispatched. I'm not sure what his sentence was. I had another guy who drowned his 2-year-old son. That fucked me up for a while because I was pregnant with my son at the time. I kept thinking how unfair that some child could be so terrified as the one person he trusted and loved was harming him. And not only that, but when you drown, you're conscious to the end. I still cry for that little boy some days. A year into the job, in a pretty large town with woods all around it, I got a call from a young man who identified himself as 21. He said he went on a hike with his best friend. This is where it got weird. I asked for his location, and it was 50 miles from the nearest trailhead, but not in the direction the trails move. I asked him to tell me what the problem was and what services he needed, when he just bursted into tears, saying that one moment his friend was in front of him, and the next he was gone. I dispatched sheriff, and it was reported that neither man was ever found. It still freaks me out to this day. I took a public safety dispatcher class for post-certification. The class is taught by a current dispatcher. The teacher played one for us that I will never forget. It was an old woman on the phone, and I was calling to report someone creeping around in the backyard. She asked him to hurry. The dispatcher says police are on their way, but won't be there for 5 minutes. The dispatcher asks for an address, but he hears it wrong. As the lady is saying the address, she gets attacked and lets out this scream that sounds like a dying animal, combined with the worst fear that you've ever heard in your life. Then, it's silence. The phone's still on, and you can hear someone moving shit around. The police spent 4 hours looking for that woman's house. The dispatcher got the address wrong. It was an example of how important it is to ask for a clear address first. I will never forget that dead woman's scream. I'm not allowed to give exact details, but one of my worst calls was from a little boy. I think he was 5. He was hiding in his closet because his dad was drunk and beating the ever-loving shit out of his mom. He lived in a very rural area, and it was about an hour drive from the nearest police detachment. I stayed on the phone with him for almost 45 minutes, trying to keep him calm. You literally talk about anything that pops into your head. The weather, their favorite TV shows, what his favorite toys are. All the while, you can plainly hear a woman screaming and crying in the background. And as the call goes on, you can still hear the guy beating her, but her screams turn into grunts and moans. You can't tune it out because you are constantly typing what you hear. Any details you can get from the background noise are valuable to the officers attending. Anyway, the members arrived, arrested a piece of shit, and I hung up once they had the kid safe. And then the phone rang again, because there's no stopping. There's no time to process what just happened, and honestly, it's probably for the best. A lot of the time, you don't find out the outcome of the call, because, as I said, there are always more phones ringing. My worst call was a child that died in a hot car. This was not a case where a parent went shopping and left a baby in the car for some time on a summer day. It was not someone who admitted they forgot their child in the back seat. This was a child that was old enough to walk, talk, turn the car on and off for air as needed, hang out and read a book, or go inside and cool off. The parent had restrained the child in an SUV, so none of these things could be done, and didn't check on the child for several hours. It was a few more hours before the parent even told anyone that the child had died. I got a call from a woman who was depressed and suicidal. She called from a disconnected cell phone and refused to give me her location. I never stopped trying to get a ping on her, but it was an apartment complex, and there wasn't much I could do for that. She refused to let me send anyone to her, refused to talk to EMS, suicide hotlines, or supervisors. I answered the phone, so I was the only one she would talk to. We talked for a really long time, not just relative to my normal calls of a couple minutes. I mean around 2 hours of my life was spent trying to talk Diane out of it. She ingested a large quantity of narcotics and alcohol. I remember her telling me her husband's name was David, and they were recently divorced. She had the narcotics for pain because she was involved in an auto accident not too long before all of this. She was unable to work, in extreme pain, and considering the recent divorce, it's easy to see why she felt the way she did. Her youngest son had just moved away from home as well. I felt really bad for her. I got a call from a frantic father, yelling his 14-month-old son wasn't breathing. The boy somehow got outside and fell in the pool. At minimum, he was underwater for a few minutes. I started giving CPR instructions over the phone. I tried my best to calm the father enough to listen to me to start compressions. One of our officers gets there and takes over CPR. The fire department gets there shortly after. I've done CPR over a dozen times as a former EMT. I've done a few over the phone, but never for a child as young as this kid. I couldn't hang up. The father left the line open, and I kept listening. I heard the compressions. I heard the life pack charging up. I heard the shock. And I heard silence still. After a few minutes, they load and go. I could hear the parents crying, blaming themselves for killing their own baby. The medics were able to get a pulse just before calling it. The NICU tried their best, but the child passed 24 hours later. I did 3 years behind the phone, and never had a call hit me so hard. I took my break early that night, and went back to work. I had 2 children trapped in a house fire. and the rest of the family ran out of the house, leaving the kids inside. The fire had engulfed the home and was blowing out the windows throughout the entire first floor. The mother called 911, and I fielded her call. The panic and despair in her voice, the screams, the pounding on the door that locked behind them when they ran out of the house, the screams of pain as someone is being burned while trying to get back into a fire-filled house, the urgency in the voice of those firefighters and police as they finally found the bodies and rushed them to the hospital, and knowing that there was nothing more that could be done while still on the phone with the screaming, hysterical mother, was hard to do. I wanted to drive there and help. I wanted to cry right with her. I wanted to yell and scream and ask whatever God why. But I had to be ready for the next call. The suicides stick with me the most. Here are a few. The first one was less than a year on. I get a call from a female who sounded numb. She said she came home from work and found her fiancé hanging from the rafters. She kept asking me, "What do I do now?" I had no answer for her, just kept repeating that I would stay on the line with her until the unit showed up. Another one, I got a call from a female who said she had just found her friend's boyfriend hanging from a tree out back, and that her friend's kids were sleeping inside, and could we please hurry so they don't have to see him in the backyard. I got a call from a hysterical elderly female. She had just woken up and found her 78-year-old husband unresponsive. I get the priority information, and I ask if he is cool to the touch, and she panics even more, yelling uncontrollably. I bring her back and start providing her CPR instructions. Keep in mind that as soon as I have a general assessment of what kind of emergency I'm dealing with, and confirm the caller's location, the appropriate units get dispatched. Our workstations consisted of 2 PCs, the PBX phone system, and a dispatch terminal. The county maintained a database of all the valid residential addresses that would pre-populate on the dispatch terminal. The local phone companies maintained their customer caller records that would display on the PBX PC. Because time is of the essence during emergencies, whatever can be made more efficient and quicker is. There's a key you could hit and transfer the address information from the caller ID PBX PC to the dispatch terminal, shaving seconds off the call start to dispatch times. If someone called and the address was not yet available on the county database, the system would attempt to find the closest match. We are approaching the 9-minute mark, and I start to get a bad feeling. I look at the map, and they are not that far away from the fire station. First responders should have already been there. By this point, she has given up on CPR, exhausted. I turn the secondary speaker to the fire radio frequency just in time to catch the paramedic in the ambulance request from her dispatcher. "Radio, can you have the caller confirm the address? We are at the address you provided, and there is no emergency here." My heart sank. I interrupt my caller's devastating sobs by asking her, "Ma'am, I just want to confirm that you're at..." It's at this point when I realized what I had done. The caller ID information matched exactly what was transferred to the dispatch terminal, with one exception. Road, not drive. I ended up sending an ambulance to the wrong address, and because of my lapse in judgment, the caller's address was not in the county database, but the closest match was, and it was located on the opposite side of the county. I could have sworn they matched before I sent the call over to be dispatched. I swear, 100%. As soon as I realized the error, I corrected the address and dispatched the correct units. I hang up the phone at 7:02 a.m. when EMS arrives on scene. 17 minutes after she woke up and called for help. I still feel like That slight lapse in judgment on my part was the reason someone died. As soon as I made it into the car, I lost it. I killed him. Me. The next shift, everyone saw how much of a toll it took on me. Everyone offered words of encouragement, saying how there wasn't anything that could be done, he was 78, etc. That day, I got my first official corrective action and was written up for failing to confirm the caller's location. My first official fuck-up in over 6 years. I became afraid of the phone and would drag myself and be the last one to answer. I quit 2 days later.